All of you are well aware that Ranking Member Portman and I are working together on an incident reporting bill that would require specific companies to report to CISA regarding cyber intrusions and when they make ransomware payments as well. Certainly, after thousands of cyber attacks, including SolarWinds, the Microsoft Exchange, and the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, I think it's probably well past time for us to have some sensible legislation put forward to make sure that we're getting timely information about these incidents. My first question is for Director Easterly. If our incident reporting bill were enacted, what would CISA do with this information, and how would you be able to help victims?
Thanks very much for your question, Chairman. First of all, we really appreciate this effort. We absolutely agree it's long past time to get cyber incident reporting legislation out there, and we're excited to work with you on this. CISA plays a critical role as the National Coordinator for Critical Infrastructure Resilience and Security. As I think about CISA's superpower that we use on behalf of the nation and the American people is our ability to share information rapidly to enable us to protect other potential victims. So what we could do with this information is not only render assistance to the victim and help them remediate and recover from the attack, but we could use that information, we could analyze it, and then we could share it broadly to see whether, in fact, evidence of such intrusions were found across the sector or, frankly, across other sectors or across the federal civilian executive branch. So we think that timely and relevant reporting of cyber incidents is absolutely critical to help us raise the baseline and protect the cyber ecosystem.
Mr. Inglis, my next question is for you. Would the type of information being collected by CISA as laid out in the draft legislation that we're working on help NCD formulate a national strategy and develop policies to prevent these attacks from happening in the first place? Clearly, we want to be a deterrent for them to occur. Would this be helpful?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I wholeheartedly support what Director Easterly just said and do believe that information would be profoundly useful for the determination of an appropriate strategy. To reprise, that information is useful to help us be more efficient and to prioritize our response in the moment, to inform investments that we should make to get left of the event to prevent these from happening in the future, and ultimately as a foundation of true knowledge, factual-based knowledge, such that we can create strategies that cover the gamut of cybersecurity activities.
Mr. DeRusha, the incident reporting data from the bill that we're talking about, as well as a PHMSA reform bill that we're also working together on, would help protect federal networks by indicating when intrusions have occurred on both private and government-owned systems, much like we saw after FireEye announced the SolarWinds attack. Is there anything else from the OMB's perspective that we should consider as we're developing the text in both of these bills?
Well, Senator, I believe it's crucial that federal civilian agencies are included. We need to ensure that we have one common standard that everyone is following. That has been my experience, both at the state and federal level, that there's a patchwork of reporting requirements, and they need to come together. It's overly burdensome, and we're not focused on the right security outcomes. The other thing I'd say, though, is we have a really good partnership with CISA sharing threat information in a timely way to federal agencies. And what we need is we need to increase the pipeline of information and get it in faster. So those are the things that I'd be really focused on.
This next question is for all three of you, and I'll start with you, Director Easterly. We'll go the same order that we just went through. Each of you has a lot of experience in the private sector, and part of what we are looking at here is mandating companies to submit these reports, but we have to make sure they actually comply with that to get this information. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, and the committee would love to hear your thoughts on the right enforcement mechanism to make sure that that information actually gets submitted. What should we be focused on? Director Easterly.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chairman. You know, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I do think a compliance and enforcement mechanism is very important here. I know some of the language talks about subpoena authority. My personal view is that is not an agile enough mechanism to allow us to get the information that we need to share it as rapidly as possible to prevent other potential victims from threat actors. So I think that we should look at fines. Fines are obviously used across industries. I just came from 4.5 years in the financial services sector, where fines are a mechanism that enable compliance and enforcement. I realize this is a complicated issue, and I really look forward to working through it with you, because I think it is important that we are able to get the information that we need in a timely way.
Thank you. Mr. Inglis?
Mr. Chairman, I support that view strongly. I would observe that most of the 50 states have reporting requirements of a similar sort, and the vast majority of those have an enforcement mechanism. Many of those use fines. There may be some best practices in there if we do a thoughtful survey of how they've actually addressed this and how that has worked and whether that has imposed an unfair burden on the victims. We, of course, don't want to impose an unfair burden on the victims, but this information is essential for the welfare of the whole. There should be rewards for good behavior. If you've performed well and thoughtfully in this, the benefit should be obvious, which is that we can provide better services, both in response and in preventing this in the future.
Mr. DeRusha?
Yes, Senator. Also agree enforcement is needed and share the views of my colleagues, and would be happy to work with this committee.
Thank you. Before I recognize Senator Carper for his questions, I need to step aside and attend another committee. As you can see from attendance, we have committees. We're actually in the middle of a vote, so members will be coming and going as this hearing continues. But Senator Hassan will chair in my absence. But as I leave, Senator Carper, you're recognized for your questions.